Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to Women with Impact event. This program is initiated by Ventures with collaboration with Xendit and also supported by Base, Mindtera, and Legit Group. So Ventures is having this event because we see that some of the statistic in women in workforce, so 50% of Indonesian graduate is actually women, but only 18 to 15% are women in senior management. So we are having these events to make a forum for women to network, and we want to also ensure that some initiative in making a workplace is a more diverse situation is happening. So today's event, we want to welcome some of the impressive speakers. The first one is Melisa Irene, partner at Ventures. So Irene, please welcome. Second one is Hillary Buntara is experimenter at Xendit. And Nelly Nurmalasari, co-founder and CEO of Pintarnya. My name is Elisa Suteja. I'm the entrepreneur in residence at Ventures. Okay. So the topic that we have today is Ignite the Burnout. I think we have heard the term burnout these past 2 years during the pandemic. I mean, the line between work and personal life is getting blurred, and the term burnout, I think we have heard in many occasions in social media, in many of the publication, study publication, learning about burnout. So we want to learn from the speakers here what are their interaction in having burnout in the company setting, their personal experience, and what can we do as a professional and as a leader so we can ignite stress in workforce before it gets into the stage where we cannot function anymore, which is burnout. But then I want to learn from Nelly, Hillary, and Irene, what do you think is the definition of burnout? And what are your personal experience in having or encountering burnout in workplace? So we can start with Nelly.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope you are coming here wanting to learn about burnout because I think burnout is real. Maybe how I determine what is definitions of burnout, maybe just illustrate a little bit of a rubber. When it's elastic, but the moment you pull and stretch it further, there's a moment of almost break. I think that's how I define, because burnout doesn't mean not like stretching. Stretching is good, but stretching it too hard that it actually breaks and make you not functioning in your day-to-day work, that's bad. I think that's how I would define burnout. And throughout my own experience, I think it's more realizing what kind of signals of that almost break. Everyone will have different symptoms. So for example, for me, let's say dreaming about work is not burnout because I do that, let's say, on daily basis. But when you started saying, let's say, for example, I have a wash, and then I just realized, hey, how come I use the shampoo for my hair or something else? Then hey, something is wrong that I totally feel off. I think for me, burnout means that breaks, and realizing the moment for burnout is actually finding those signals. Is it, this is too hard? Am I almost breaking? And then kind of reevaluate yourself. Thank you.
That's very interesting. So if you dream about your work,
depends, right? If someone actually dream about work every day, that's normal. But if someone never dream about work and suddenly you sleep and then you say to your husband, no, it doesn't make sense. No, the number doesn't right. Then in the morning your husband say how come you going about work? And that's abnormal.
Yeah. Again, the signal for everyone is different, and it's very interesting to learn from Nelly what's her take on burnout. But again, Hillary, do you have a different take? What is your definition of burnout, and what do you think about this situation?
I think Nelly has a really good metaphor. I had one, but it's actually the rubber Was really, really good. I was thinking of it more like actually really if a candle, you could be slowly like, of course you have a limited amount of energy, which is your like candlestick and wax. And eventually over time, the stick gets shorter and shorter. The light sometimes burns hotter, sometimes it burns less. I think maybe the pulling of the rubber feels like when, there's winds and, pressure around you that makes the flame a little bit flicker and smaller. And burnout is when that flame is extinguished, right? That's kind of like the breaking point, like Nelly mentioned. And I think, like Nelly said, it's natural for you to experience wins, to slowly, reduce the amount of energy you have left. It's about, I think, finding ways to, I don't know, this is not logical, but add more wax underneath, more energy, energy in, energy out. And also, I think finding ways to kind of put yourself in an environment or, maybe put on windshields or something. So there's still wind, but you've kind of like built resilience and built prevention ways to help yourself adapt to it. And then the second question about personal experience, I think through my life, as I'm sure all of you here who are proactive enough to like attend an event like this on a Thursday morning, you guys are also those who are very ambitious. So going through different phases has built up a lot of has burned a lot of my wax. And then I think there was a point actually where my fire was like close to being extinguished, and I think that was because I realized that too late. So maybe that's one of the topics that I'll be like asking about as well, which is like how do you identify it early so that you don't get to that like nothing left, right? And then it's so difficult to like reignite a flame versus just like adding more wax.
I love the candle analogy as well, Hillary.
Thank you.
That's great. And from Irene, what do you think?
I think it's the similar conclusions at the end, right? Because we live in such fast-paced environment. I believe. How many? May I have a maybe show of hands? How many of you guys are founders? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Or are you working in startups? Sorry, you are the guys are founders and maybe the team members in the startups. Okay. And who are working in corporates or maybe not startups? Okay, so majority are in startups, right? I think in startups is a very fast-paced environment. Sometimes you are very used to on like going forward, striving through and whatnot. So the line in between on like pushing further, not knowing the limits, and then like stepping out and say, okay, this is my limit is very hard actually to define, right? I'd like to define that moment of burnout is by when you do so much and then you actually just ended up in a point where you no longer are willing to do it anymore. I think some of the symptoms that I look is that you come at a state where you no longer want to fully participate in all these things, and it can be really, really bad in order to like signing out in that phases, right? So personal experience, I think for me, usually when we look at the burnout, like what are the triggers for it, right? I think for me personally, it's been like the COVID environment. Actually, that's like one the biggest one. I think there was one point where it's not about the job that we are working on, but it's basically handling the people who are going in and off hospitals. So I think that moment was kind of like very stressful, and I was lucky enough there are other people that helped me identify that, and lucky enough that the Delta period, I think that time was passed quickly. So I was able to recover back quickly. So I think support system, people that knows you and identifies you as well, that you are actually passing that point, is actually a very helpful system to getting out of the burnout itself.
Awesome, Irene. I think we will move on to the next question. So I'll deep dive on each of your experience as a founder, as an investor, and as a team leader. What can we do to identify and help, hopefully, for the team member that is having a burnout? So first, from Nelly, I want to ask, who do you think is responsible in identifying a burnout? Is it us as a team leader, or is it actually the employee, they themselves?
Okay, I share my take. I think maybe I'll share a bit my own experience before like just standing on the stage. So I started my career at BCG, management consulting firm. I spent there for 10 years. Then I moved to Traveloka, the last 4 years actually heading the accommodation business. And now as a founder. So I realized that I've been through that experience where I was, let's say, the most junior person in the firm, trying to protect myself, trying to protect my family, being the only pregnant woman the whole Southeast Asia. And I realized that I couldn't rely on the ecosystem because I was the only population. Let's say we didn't have breastfeeding room, for example, and I have to look after myself. And my bosses, they don't understand. Like they didn't have family. They didn't get shout when you're, come back like 3 a.m. in the morning every day, for example. I think I realized that I had to take that, right? I discussed for flexibility. For example, I was, let's say, part of Malaysia office. I had to come to Jakarta, and then I was like, okay, I have this baby. Can I bring my nanny? I want it to be like all negotiated, to be like all paid for, everything, make it work for me, because no one look after me. I think that's my experience as a junior person. And when I moved to Traveloka, I realized that I think I led around like 700 people. And I realized that I couldn't, like, hey, this is my chance. I shaped the policy. I don't have the final say, but I do notice of like, kind of like influence the leaders and how to, because I have experienced it. I didn't have enough support. I wanted to make sure that the leads understand. So I made it's their responsibilities, because I only have 2 eyes. I can't look after everyone. And I think that's where you started kind of like have that in your casual one-on-ones with the team leads, asking, how's your team? I think I've seen this person always green at Slack, like around these hours. Is she okay? Like those kind of questions. I think making it as a normal conversations, making it real, that it's okay to highlight. And even sometimes, let's say we do a team reassignment, like, hey, I have this huge critical project. I want it to get done. Like, who is on it? Then I'm asking like, okay, but you've been giving like all this critical like on her. Don't you think like you kind of need to balance it with someone else? I think those kind of things is more like how I influence it, let's say at Traveloka. But now, let's say I built Pintarnya. I'm the CEO and co-founder. I mean, I not only like shape the policy, but I make the policy. I think it's different nuance. It's more about communicating it without realizing it. For example, a simple thing. What's the leave policy at Pintarnya? I told the team that, the maximum carryover leave is only 3 days. It's not that I don't want to kind of like burn it out, but I want to make sure you take your leave. And then usually in the leadership meeting, I ask like, hey, anyone, your team members, after the 3 months, no one's taking leave, can you make sure some of your team members take leaves? So something like that. Or even an example, we have a policy of work from office 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday. But then one of the team members just arrived, and then she just found out that she's pregnant. And then she came to me and said that, I think I have some difficulties. Can I get some support? Okay, the first 3 months, do it at home, stay at home. I think that's kind of like making it flexible, that it's okay, it's normal for your leads to escalate this thing, and we can talk it out. That's like what's important.
Yeah, I do agree. Like normalizing the conversation is really important. That's great. And Hillary, as a team leader, I mean, previously your personal experience, you have worked in a different country and also different, I cannot say industry because you work in government before, right? So what do you think the differences between the working situation in other places, and what is the policy that do you think is good from those places that maybe like we can have it here also?
Thank you. Yeah, I think also similar, just a quick intro about myself. I have worked in a startup in the US, so that's where my maybe more regional, global experience comes from. And then I've worked in government. Thankfully, not the bureaucratic kind. Was able to work on a special team with a minister. And then I also actually have tried to build and then have pivoted a startup. So I've tried that, but a very small team. So not leading a huge no policy shaping there. And then finally here now in Xendit, I'm part of the experiments team. So we build new products from 0 to 1. And that's where I kind of experienced building a startup, but within another startup. So I don't have to do the stress of fundraising, but I get to raise fun. Sorry, that's about fun. But yes, so I think what I've noticed is most different. Maybe I'll start with the global context is just from where the country is at. So in the US, people are already compensated very well, right? So work isn't so much a focus of their life because they're if they lose it, they have a lot of fallback. There's unemployment insurance. There's, they've been paid pretty well for quite a while. So they have a bit of fallback and savings. Whereas I think in Indonesia, I think it's getting much better. But, people aren't compensated as well as they should, I think. So maybe they're very, very dependent, right? They're mostly living paycheck to paycheck, trying to support their family. So first, that's how people are so attached to their work here is because it is so impactful to their lives. Also, you can't get a visa without employment here. Americans don't need a visa to go anywhere. For example, right? Simple things like that. And then another thing is also, I think, the culture of pushback. So in Asian culture, we tend to not say no. In America, they don't care. If they don't want to do it, they just say, dude, I gotta go home, pick up my kid from school or something, and they'll just say no. So they have better boundaries and also just that sense of self to say no. But I think that's for the global differences. For government, I think it was super different. Things, as you guys probably expect, are kind of slow. So there's not really a lot of work to do. I think the stress is more I'm a woman who's not that old. I'm Chinese and I'm Christian. How do I convince all these bapaks to do anything? So it's a different kind of stress. I think though my leader was very empowering. So he would let me present and then just say, yeah, do whatever Hillary says. So I think that's a good segue to what I think I want to take from each place is that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. It matters who the leader is. I think that person really defines if people can easily burn out or not. I think in all my places, I've been very lucky to get people who give me ownership. And when you spend a lot of time building something, you have ownership. Even though you're not a founder, you feel like you're building something, so you're not as tired, right? Versus I'm building just to build this spreadsheet and then just to get a paycheck. Versus I am helping to create this new system that will make this company earn more money because I own part of the company as well. I think different ways, right? There's from a actual financial standpoint of owning a company and then also the day-to-day. So I think that's one thing, the ownership part, and then giving the space to say no. So here in Xendit, I used to be the yes man person. So I told Moses, I was say no for me. Imagine if you ask me to do this, I will say yes. Do you really want me to do this? So I asked him to filter what gets to me, and that's the explicitly asking for help part, because I felt my candle was burning thin and I didn't know how to build it, so I said do it for me. So I think giving people the space to feel okay to say no is also another important factor.
That's awesome. Do you have any personal experience dealing with burnout or maybe interaction with someone who is encountering a burnout? What do you think is helpful for them that we can do if we know a friend or a colleague or a team member that is having a burnout?
Yeah, I think what Nelly said, just checking in very frequently, and then being more explicit of like what that person has been taking on. Because a lot of people here are yes women and yes men, right, in our teams, and they don't want to say no because like their jobs are very impactful. So it's our job to kind of like look out for them. Sometimes on Slack, my colleagues would like ping me at 12, like, get off, like, or at 1, right? And I'm like, you get off. Why are you here? Like, you can text me. So I don't know if you want to set up like a patrol, like at night on Slack, who's green. But yes, always looking out for your friend, just checking in. Even the first 2 minutes in a meeting, just like, hey, how are you? Like, how's things been? I think it's very helpful.
Actually, I would like to add, I think I see some of the founders here, realize it or not, the burnout can be caused by you, like even me, for example, in Pintarnya. That sometimes like we dream big. We want A, B, C, D. And I think I kept telling my team, it's my job to dream big because otherwise, like you will not go anywhere. But making it like explicit that do challenge me if this is not the right thing, that's important. And I think often we forget the impact of being focused. So let's say this is something that I started changing the last 1 month. I saw in my team, they're like scrambling to many places. And I told them like, it's rather than doing a 3-4 mini experiments and nothing work, it's better just pick one, like drop it. What are you doing? Next meeting, I don't want to hear the 2, 3, and 4. Give me the 1. I think that is sometimes that we as a founder forget that, yes, we want to dream big, but like we kind of need to balance everyone when it's actually to focus, when it's to experiment, when to push people, and when to give it a break, something like that.
Yeah, as a team leader, definitely like we need to be the one that can measure the burden for the employees. That's totally agree. And last but not least, like Irene, you look after the team member at East Ventures, obviously, and you also have interaction with founders, and lots of people here are also founders. What do you think is happening in this era, like pandemic, so many burns out, and I'm sure like there are a lot of those percentage of people having burnout is actually a founder. So the first question is, what have you seen and what can we do?
Yeah, I think the first one, let's talk about the team member. I think it either in VC or startup, right? We are all building companies, and when I talk about building, usually started with small, like I don't know, some with 3, 5, and then you grow to like whatever number, and it continues to grow. And there are different challenges as that numbers grows, right? The frequency that you have when you're able to check in and whatnot. I think maybe sharing from my experience, when the team is small, it's so easy to see the differences that's happening. And pre-pandemic, let's say, when you see everybody's in office, suddenly they don't want to eat, for example, or suddenly they try different things. You see their face, they gesture and whatnot. So you know whether they are actually not in the mood and whatnot. And that's the time to actually check up on like what's happening, right? But in pandemic era, I think that becomes more challenging, especially probably if your company is probably new. Many of the new hires that you made might be online, and you might meet them first time in 2022, maybe. So that adds some kind of like adaptations also that is needed. It's important that you have like, you are not alone all over this. It's important that you have a ring of trusted leaders also in your organizations that actually helps you to be able to breach that, right? Because if, let's say, it's like 100 people, I don't know now if you have a lot, like it's impossible to check on every single person. So build a rapport with like a group of like team leaders that actually can help them to check on this. But it's also important to look at the cost, right? I think like one says that they are burnt out. And it's important to double click on that. Like what are the costs possibly of that burnout? And then I think in the experience that I saw, right, it usually is not only about work. It could be about like their family relationship, for example. It could be with the other challenges that they face, either with their friendship, romantic relationship, or whatnot. So looking at that, being able to identify like what can you do about about this? It is something that the company can need to change on the policy wise, or you actually just need to give these individuals some space. For example, I think like in the pandemic era, I think a couple of like colleagues in East Ventures, especially the working moms, what I've heard is that they have like an added responsibilities, and what stresses them the most is the fact that when the kids are at home and you suddenly have to be the teacher of the kids because the school kind of like it's all online and they just want to close the laptop, they don't want to study and whatnot, and you are in the middle of the meeting, you have to go grab your kids and tell them to have to study and whatnot. So that is a new role that they have to take, and it's not something within their control, that the kids don't want to study. So suddenly you are faced with the situations that you cannot control at home, but you yourself are actually have to also be online with the more demanding type of like, like that kind of like, whatever, like Zoom meetings that's like continuously going on, right? So if you understand this, and what they need is actually more space. So this is something that the company can provide I would say like a custom approach. Like it doesn't have to be for everybody. It should be for targeted to those people who are actually facing that issues. But you may also find the issues of people in when they say they are burnt out, right? It might be because they are lack of training, for example. And you might require a different approach as well to tackle these issues. So let's say someone is just promoted and then suddenly there's expectations of like new roles that is actually they should do. But maybe they are not clear of like that expectation because maybe some of the communications are being chopped out during the COVID and whatnot. And as well as they felt that the skills that they had at that time is not important. It's not yet accommodative to the new role. So if we understand about this, right? So then what is important is actually provide this group of individuals trainings, for example. So I think the bottom line is check. I think like Nelly and Hillary also mentioned, check-in is very important, and double click of like, what is it that your team is actually facing, and actually look at the approach that you can have. I think on founders, it's definitely very tough, right? Like if we talk about us as an employees, is that our relationship with our work and our responsibility to our employer. I think when you're founders, you take a different roles. You are responsible for your customers, responsible for your employees, and to a certain extent, you're responsible to your investors as well. So I think a lot of like cases where the founders are being burnt out because they juggle so many roles, especially also if they have different roles in their homes, for example, and combine it all together, it becomes like a very stressful situations that they might face as well. So with this, right, I think what we were trying to do is to be more empathetic in this situation. And again, I think I would emphasize the importance of like double clicking. I think we try to do like every founder face different situations. Every founder has different levels of the maturity of the business as well, and they face different difficulties. So it's not going to be effective to like push one for everybody the same. So maybe some of the examples, I think like what the situations had caused to some of the founders, I think some of them are being very stressed because like the business situations is very hard. They were just about like they have to expand the business, but the situations like they felt that they are not within their control. I think some help that can be needed was to sit down with them and say that, hey, we acknowledge the situations is changing as well, and the previous projections might not be necessarily adjustable to current situation. I think that kind of helps a little bit if the issue is actually on business. There are other issues, dimensions that we see. The issue is actually on the relationship that they have. I think a lot of like founders, let's say, have issues with their co-founders, for example, and maybe it suck it to the so bad that it turns into hatred, and it turns to be a very unhealthy relationship. So in that extent, right, it doesn't matter like how the business performance would be, because the issue is with the rapport of the two of them. And just sharing, I think there are some cases where the founder turned very suicidal, and it turned out to the moment that there's no use of trying to continually doing this. So it's better for the founders to rest and maybe move on and try different other things. So I think as an investor, the role that we try to play is to be empathetic and being able to sit down and run through like what actually is the source of issues that they're actually facing.
Awesome, Irene. I think so many insights from Irene, and I believe like everyone here also want to interact and ask a specific question about burnout or anything that the speakers here have to say about it. So I want to open the floor for questions. If there's any, please.
My name is Rati. I'm from Base. We're creating clean, vegan, sustainable beauty products. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your experience. It serves as a great reminder for me as a founder as well. Sometimes maybe me, myself, as a founder, is the one causing burnout to my team member. But we do realize that these days the term burnout itself seems to get thrown around really easily. And one of the patterns that I noticed from the team member, also from fellow founders who also experience these things, is that they're starting to notice that their team members seems to kind of like lower down the standard of what actually defines as burnout. So they're actually not burning out, but it's simply they're not pushing themselves enough, or they're doing something that's slightly out of their comfort zone. On the other hand, we realize that in order for them to grow, they need to do something that's outside of their comfort zone. So I guess one of the things that I would like to ask is, how would you differentiate, the real burnout versus, regular complaint? And perhaps you could also shed some light on your experience on how to kind of like push your team without crossing the line. So yeah, thank you.
Nelly, do you want to?
Sure. I'll tackle one by one. One is how to differentiate. Is it just a normal complaint of burnout? Is it really burnout? I think first, as a founder or even a team leaders, you cannot lower down your standard. You're right. And I think that should be clear and made it clear to everybody. That's the expectations. I think burnout will require more empathy to understand whether this person has tried hard and for how long. I think maybe that's how I would kind of like qualify it. And that's why realizing what is everyone doing for how long, for what period, that's important to filter out the noise. I get the same complaints in the current team as well, right? Like doing this. And then sometimes I'm like, hey, but that's the expectation, right? Like, if we don't do that, how would we grow? I think kind of like throwing it back, the questions. But you need to realize of this like soft nuance and like, you'll see, right? Like the stress out in the face, that kind of like go into the room and somehow the mood is very low. I think that's the reason why, for me, I'm quite persistent. I want to show up in the office everyone Tuesday and Thursday is for that reason, for me to observe and see. And that's why I think setting the expectation, whenever I say that, like give your team some slacks. But, this 1, 2, 3, I don't compromise on this. I think it's more getting back to clarify your focus. Like A, B, C, I'm like, I need to get it done. D, E, F, I'm letting go. I think it's something like that needs to be clear, because if you don't set that different tone, then it's weak. It's weak for like why the ABC needs to get done. Why? Because I'm letting it go for the D, E, F. And I think making it fair for everyone.
Yeah, and the second question:
yeah.
how do we push our team member, but not until they reach to the breaking point?
Yeah, I think on that, I'm mostly relying to my extended leaders, but I'm also doing it with the current leaders. So how to do it, to really understand their personal life. Because I think what Irene mentions is correct. Like the trigger point for everybody, it's not necessarily about work. So for example, I have one of my team leader, he's excellent, but suddenly I see let's say the productivity at work is no longer there and stuff. And understanding what's happening in his life is important. So I asked, okay, what's happening? I think in the past few days, I see you kind of like stressing out and all. And then, oh yeah, apparently I was thinking about to get engaged. I wanted to propose to this person. And then you realize, hey, okay, this is what's happening in his life. And I was about to throw in a critical project to him. And then I was brainstorming with my co-founders. I said, hey, this is what's happening. He's doing this. He's valuable. I want to give him a slack. Can I actually reassign this to someone else? I think that's happening. in at least in my organizations. But to be able to do that, I think that kind of like personal touch of knowing what's everyone's up to, what are they doing. Like for example, I know who's getting married, I know who about to get engaged, I know who is moving from Jakarta Barat to Jaktim. Those kind of things is more like questions like asking, are you doing one-on-one with your team? Are you doing beyond work? Do you know what are they doing? Do you know what's stressing them out? I think that can help to kind of like know how to push it further. But when you do that, in the same time, you're asking, hey, how about this? Is it done? You know, like those kind of things. It's all about balancing, right? I think that's my
Understanding our team is really important.
Tapi I really kind of agree with Nell. You shouldn't compromise the expectations with that anyway, right? Like maybe now because there's like some, how to say, keringanan atau gimana ya, that was given, and a lot of like people assume that people were like struggling and whatnot, but the situation has somewhat changed, right? And today we live in a very competitive world as well, and the change in the industry requires more resilience than ever, actually. So it's important to clarify and then keep it up to high standard as well, but without, I think what Nelly mentioned is correct, like keeping the cadence out in ensuring that you know when it's actually off the limits.
Yeah. I actually have experience of like trying to understand my team, but then like they're like, kenapa tanya-tanya gitu. Jadi I think we also have to be very, very empathetic and also do that on a personal level. So the relationship is not only work but also personal. Any questions from the floor?
I want to add one more thing. Your team is not a team of one. When I said about balancing, it means actually rotating rotating the stretch. Because that's what I mentioned about me reassigning this to there. You want to make them understand that sometimes we give you slack, but you need to cover to your friend. Like that's like the collaborative culture you need to set up. Like you can deserve some breaks, but you need to find out who can cover for that when you need to have a break. I think that's like how balancing in between, because I think it's unrealistic to give someone a slack for forever, right? But when you do a good stress out, then you give them a break and say, hey, I think I've seen you going to these events and stuff in the weekend. Monday, why don't you just like start the half day off? Something like that. I think that's kind of like balancing in A, B, C, load balancing is very important.
Yeah. But the event is work event, right? On the weekend. You go to this event. Actually, like if the floor don't have the question, I do want to have a question with everyone here. Nelly mentioned how asking help to your team leader is important if the population doesn't works in your favor, right? But asking help is difficult. What do you think is the way to ask for help when, as a woman, normally like we're a bit shy and also be apologetic in asking for help. So what are your tips on sharing on asking for help?
Yeah, maybe this is borderline career advice from my side. Actually, before you ask for help, you need to establish credibility first. I think that's how I see it. I mean, like if you think of you just join a new firm and then you haven't established your credibility and then started like, I need A, B, and C. It doesn't work to your favor, to your brand. I think that's why asking for help, the more you feel comfortable that you establish your value to whoever you work with, then like you gain that. You have that credit to actually ask. I think so. So don't be shy. Think about it that who owns your career? It's yourself. And I recall like when I was at BCG, I was like a population of one. So I realized that, hey, why the police policy? There's no such things about, let's say, extended unpaid leave after I gave birth, because no one has ever asked it, right? And then I was rethink about it, like, should I ask? And then I said, hell yes, like I've delivered so much to this firm, like I think I deserved it. And then I'm no longer like shy in asking it. But if I recall in my early years, of course I didn't ask. Like I like, who am I to ask? Like, am I a diva? No, right? I think there's something like that. So that's why it's like it's borderline career advice, and do share that to your team as well. That if you have something, like ask for it. But when you say that, you don't say it to everyone as well, right? You will see for someone you will really fight for, then you really encourage that. And some like, yeah, I think it's okay, something like that.
Yeah. Hillary, do you have any experience of like how to ask help?
Yeah, I think Nelly made a really good point about building credibility over intensity and time, right? I think when I first joined Experiments, we weren't a population of one, but we were a very small population running multiple products at once. So, from our leader was Moses. So he knew what he was giving to us. There wasn't really like a middle person for us to ask for, maybe like a higher approval or anything. That was helpful. Maybe if you guys have like skip levels or anything, what we do here at Xendit as well, we have like open slots on Friday where anyone can just book 30 minutes with the C levels, right? Maybe if you guys want to spend more time with other skip levels, that's actually a great idea, because usually people come in and they open up during those sessions. But yes, so back to the story of building credibility. We've spent like 2 years building like 6 different products that end up not launching, or maybe launching but then had to be like delayed or anything like that. And these are literally like hours till like 3 a.m. So I used to work in McKinsey, which was crazy, but this was even more intense. So you can imagine this like even crazier than consulting intensity. And what happened was like I would work, this was COVID, so I had nowhere to go and nothing to do. So I just keep working. I was working every single weekend. We had a lot of national holidays, but the thing with Xendit is because the Experiments team doesn't really sit in any country. We don't follow anyone's public holidays. So we end up not having any holidays. So literally I spent like 2 years working nonstop. And then I think at one point, my body couldn't take it. I was just like, jittery, and like I couldn't really breathe. So I was like, okay, physically something's wrong. I didn't feel tired, but my body was telling me like, dude, you gotta like stop. So I used that opportunity and I was like, hey, I'm really, really sorry. As with people who I think actually do get burnout, you guys do put a standard on yourself, right? So you feel bad for asking, but I think what you expect your leader to, how the leader would react is usually very different. So first I would expect with like, okay, but can you give me an ETA of when you'll feel better and like when you'll be able to give me an ROI on your salary again? That's what I expected, right? So I prepared all those calculations. I was like, I'm this tired. Maybe I'll need like this amount of time, and then I'll like tell you back like here. What if I reduce my work hours from like 12 hours to 10 hours? And like I tried calculating and I came up with a whole spreadsheet. And like during the call, all he asked was like, "Are you okay? Like what can I do to help? Like I have a world of resources. What is it you're feeling?" Like Irene said, he was like double clicking on the root cause of the issue. And to his point, it wasn't just work, right? It was like everything else that was happening in my life. So I think building credibility is definitely very helpful. But I've also had team members in my team who haven't but I've given them the benefit of the doubt and thought like, okay, this person's going into a new role. Like like Irene said, her name is Mel. Well, anyways, hi Mel. But she'll like testify to this because I think she did a great job. Like she was new to the team, right? But she was in a role that was completely new. She used to work on marketing and now she's in product. So everything was overwhelming. I didn't provide enough training for her. I just like threw her in the deep end. So she was pretty like tired pretty quickly. And she asked like, hey, how do I deal with this? And I was like, take a break, just like leave and like cut yourself off from work for like X number of days. And she did that. And when she came back, she was like hitting the ground running and like well-deserved break, I think, even though it was like a very short time. But there was a lot of return on that short break.
That's awesome. Very interesting story. Irene, do you have anything to add?
I think one way definitely asking for help is, like sometimes the worry is that am I asking too much or am I asking, is it okay to ask? I think one bar I like to use that to think like, if I own this company and someone asked me this and like how you have contribute to the company, will you give it to them or not? So, but Hillary added to it interestingly. Sometimes what your leader might respond might be differently as well. So I think some experience that I did, I think this was back in 2017. So it was pretty small team where we basically do everything. I was really tired. I think that's approaching month of November. And they gave me a last project. We were very thin organizations as well. So us and the managing partner. So the last project that was given was the building data room for Kudo and Grab acquisition at the time. So building data room, I think maybe people take about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And because the founder was going on a honeymoon, they gave me 3 days to build it from scratch. So I remember like going in, I think I would go in at 7 a.m. to their office and going back at 4 a.m. for about 3 to 4 days straight, just to do that. So I realized at the end of it, this is not so good. And considering like how the year has been with a small team and the number of portfolios, I think I wanted a break that was like meaningful for me as well. So I found an organization, an NGO that I wanted to volunteer at that time. So I was thinking this is what I had in mind. I deserve this. So if I want to go on a break and go for this organization, he might give it or not give it. I think I still want to do it anyway. So I did ask, and I prepared also like whatever answers that I need, like whatever that I will continue to contribute double back in the time that I came back from that leave. Interestingly, no question asked. He just said, please go ahead. So I think that gives a sense of like concluding to what Nelly also said. Like if you build your credibility over there, and surprisingly, maybe the leader is not as kejam lah, as you actually think. So as you're doing that, like don't try to actually ask for that help. Yeah.
It's not like on the list, but I want to ask, like, what happens if the founder asks it to the VC though? Like,
Nelly.
No, from the PC perspective.
You mean like
Please go.
like the founder tell to the VC, I'm so burnout and it's really tough situation, blah blah blah. Have it ever happened before, and how? I mean, what's the experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think couple cases have happened, but that's like the not very often. And I would definitely emphasize the importance of like double clicking, right? But when someone is tired, right, and you are a founder and you are tired, you need to actually get your motivation back, right? And sometimes like it's if it is something that is reasonable, something that you are giving to your employee anyway, this is something that's also like the founder as a member of the organization deserves to get as well. So like a break and whatnot. I think a lot of times there are a couple of like, I remember, I think 2018, like a couple of founders was very tired of like fundraising. They spoke to like, 50, 60 VCs and not ending up in the like one single term sheet. So that was really, really stressful experience. And what they request for, okay, I want to break, I want to go out with, I think the girlfriend or fiance, I forgot like the state. So want to go out 2 weeks, get refreshed. So at that time, he should go for it, because what's the point of like pushing through and you look at the state of someone no longer like being so motivated anymore. So I think he did win, and then when he came back, he said that, okay, I think we need to sell the company. So I think then he changed the strategy into like finding an acquirer instead of VC, and that company has been acquired.
Very interesting.
But now, don't start.
I have a different take though as a founder. No. I mean, like, I think my different take as a founder is more, I don't know, this is maybe just me. Treat your existing investor as your new investor. Like, I think that's how I see it. And maybe this is going back to, as a founder, who am I responsible to? Like, my shareholders, my investors, my customer, my employees. I think those are more the stakeholder I need to manage. And I get support more on the other side. So I'm thinking that when you ask about like founders going to, let's say, VC, like I think maybe more like me, personal advice to other founders. Maybe like don't do that, because I said maybe it's more like ideally that's why treat your even existing investor as your new investors. You need to like realistically you need to toughen up, right? Like you get support from elsewhere. You get support from your co-founders. You get support from family, for friends. That's where you collect like the strength. But of course, there's like some moment of weakness when you mentioned about I'm so struggling here. I need to discuss about it. Still, it's more like play it carefully, thoughtfully. I think maybe that's my take, because eventually that is more like you're responsible to deliver the return on investment. Maybe. But Irene brought a good example. I think it's a different case if this is like, I don't know, personal fight between the co-founders and all, and that's a valid point to bring it up. But to the founders in this room, if you feel like in the brinks of burning out and all, VC is not the first place for you to actually like establish that I'm stressing out. Find other support. So maybe that's my take.
That's true. Like I see like some of the faces here is like, oh, okay, I will not do that. Is there any questions from the floor?
I think maybe to that point is as the go along, what we have is knowing the limit is important, right? Like if, like Nell said, if you can actually toughen up, get it, then, but on the brink of like, either like to continue, to not continue.
Yeah.
I think that's the point maybe to come in. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Okay. If there is no... Oh, please.
My name is Astra. And Melisa, it's like you read my mind as a founder, like everything that you tell about burnout and then school and Nelly as well. But my question is, sometimes as a founder, it's also continuing the question. It's really hard to establish boundaries on your employees' comfort and, having like they tell you about all those stories about their life. And then at some point you have to stop empathizing. I'm also a do-line life coach. Sometimes it's really hard for them to stop telling stories, and then you want to empathize, but you also want to build your company. And also, I think it also comes because we are a woman as well. So how you establish the boundaries of having this comfort for your employees and also still building your company?
Okay. You're right. I do make tough calls. I do make like what the jobs needs to get delivered anyway. I think it's more about being empathetic about it. I think like, for example, when we, like last week, Pintarnya, we kind of like set up a new idea. We want to experiment. And then we said we want to launch it 1st of December. So it's kind of like, hey, I give you 2 weeks to launch this. And I think I when I delivered that, I know some of the team members are actually planning to do something else. Like, for example, I already like kind of like planning to take some leave or something. kind of more like acknowledging it. Like, I know you are in these situations. You told me you have this commitment, but I'm so sorry to actually ask you for this. This is something that we really need to get done. If this is not, and this is kind of like the risk. So I think it's more like still get it done, but win the heart. Kind of like sharing the reason behind it. Sharing like, why is this so urgent? Why, despite knowing all the things happening in the world, I still want to get it done. I think that's more like the art of communicating it. And of course, you will see that some of the disappointment, but you will still ask back the questions. Do you get it? Do you get it? Like, why am I asking this? Why is it so crucial? And you will establish, like, yeah, you understand some of the personalities. Some will say like, yeah, I understand. But some will just like a lip service only, you understand, and you see the grudge in the eyes or something, right? And that's actually where kind of like a follow-up. I think, yeah, eventually you know what needs to get done. But I was once in the situations that I pushed someone for that, and I thought that he could deliver, and I still gave the project to him. And then I didn't see that I won his heart. Like, you know, I tried to make him understand, but I think he's just doing it for the sake of doing it. Then I do a check-ins like after that. And then he finally came forward and said that, yeah, you know, like all of this, I think this is too much for me because and so and so and so. And I gave it back to him. Okay, if you have an options, either you do this or this, you know, like playing it back to him. And then he actually said that, yeah, I don't want to do this. And then I asked, if you don't do this, what are you going to do? And he threw me back like the alternative. And then I asked, like, why are you doing that? Because something else. And then I think I realized that sometimes I kind of like need to make it clear of like, what is everyone best other alternatives? And apparently that kind of conversations that made us align on the same page that, hey, actually you're right. Like, I didn't know that when you push me to do this A, you allow me to let go this. I didn't know. And that's why I think in the beginning I said that, hey, balancing it, I think that's what I happened. Like I experienced that. And that's why whenever I ask someone to do more, typically at the end of the conversations, okay, I want to do this, what's on your plate? Okay, this one drop. Kind of like exchange it with this. I think that's kind of like how to still put the pressure and really kind of like amplifying the risk. You know, if you don't do this, it was gonna be do A, B, you know, like those kind of thing that works. And that's like us being a female leaders, staying it to the face. It's not a nice sandwich, you know, like it's tell the meat, share the meat. I think
so
that's
you
important.
don't agree with the sandwich?
Sandwich will not get things done.
Yeah. So sandwich is like you say something nice first, you ask, then like you say something nice again. So Nelly prefer just say the meat.
Okay, bread and the meat. Not the bread.
So like how to ask the question is really important. And today like we learned so much about burnout, women at workplace, and also what can we do as a team leader, what kind of policy that maybe we can copy from all these amazing leaders that we can apply to our work. So I think with this, I want to close the today's sessions. Thank you so much for attending. Again, like we will also say thank you to Legit Group that is providing the lunch today. Please do stay around, network with the female founders and professionals here. And thank you again for coming.